This video is brought to you by Ridge Wallet. We teamed up to do a special flash sale that runs for only 48 hours and gives you a huge 30% off one of their most popular wallets in the entire Ridge lineup, the Matte Black. It's offer code SKILLUP30 at checkout, but only for the next 48 hours. Click the link below or stick around to the end of the video to learn more.
That's a penis!
Alright, Scorn. I've been so excited to talk about this one because this is such an interesting game that I'm sure is going to generate plenty of discussion for all the things it gets both right and wrong, but also based on how people might respond to each of those things. Truly objective game criticism is obviously not a thing that exists, but there are some games where the band representing potential responses is quite narrow. God of War is cool is a statement that 9 out of 10 people are going to agree with because almost all of its elements are varying degrees of excellent, and most of us are going to respond to each of those elements in a similar way. Like, it always feels pretty fucking cool to recall that axe, right? Very few people are going to disagree with that. But Death Stranding is cool? That is when you can start to have some really interesting conversations about how one man's trash is another man's treasure. The arduousness of that gameplay loop is something that you're either going to love or hate, and that's a judgment that's totally separate from any assessment of how well that gameplay loop has been built. People don't dislike Death Stranding because it's buggy or unclear or because the controls are imprecise or whatever. They dislike it because of the gameplay loop's objectives, not the gameplay loop's execution. I suspect that it's going to break a very similar way here for Scorn, a game that sets for itself some unique objectives that aren't going to be to everyone's palate. Scorn is so committed to its singular visual motif that some may find it one note, while others may take pleasure in unearthing the artistic inspirations that subtly evolve in each new zone. Some may find its level design purposefully confusing and obtuse, while others may delight in the meta puzzle that is each game's labyrinthine structure. Some, I expect many, will penalize Scorn for its awkward combat and limited enemy design, while others may wave these away and say they're more pacing mechanisms rather than core gameplay elements. Almost everything that Scorn does or doesn't do can be sliced this way or that, and I think that in itself is an achievement because it speaks to a clear intent on the part of the developer to create something that cannot be so easily pigeonholed. Most of what we play can pretty easily be pigeonholed, and I'm very partial to experiences that can't be. That's one of the reasons that I love Death Stranding so much, and it's one of the reasons that, despite some issues here and there, I really did love Scorn. The starting point for Scorn is, and always has been, its art design. From the very formation of the project circa 2014, it was clear that the developers were drawing inspiration from two famed artists. The first was H.R. Giger, a Swiss artist whose work explored the link between man and machine, with a healthy dose of erotica thrown in as a reminder of humanity's primary mechanical functionality, reproduction. If his style looks at all familiar to you, it's because he led the design of the aliens and the Prometheans in Ridley Scott's acclaimed movie series, earning an Academy Award in the process. The other artist was Polish-based Zdzisław Besinski, a surrealist who rendered visions of a doomed future consumed by decay, corruption, and a host of eldritch horrors. His work is more colourful than the often monochromatic Giger, and it's more alive even when it's portraying death. If any of this looks familiar to you, it's maybe because you've played The Medium from Bloober Team, a game that was directly inspired by Besinski's art. The combination of these two art styles is one of the more inspired choices that the developer makes here in Scorn. Giger's style serves as a skeleton. It's the primary style that informs level design, mechanical design, textures on each panel, and the adornments in each space. Again, if you've seen any of the Alien films, particularly the more recent ones, this is all going to jump out at you. It's like exploring a crashed Promethean ship. Onto this biomechanical skeleton is grafted a set of Besinski-inspired horrors. There is a corruption that's taken root and it seeps into different parts of the world, suffocating its mechanized efficiency. Some of the corruption has become so potent that it detaches itself from the mass and walks freely, patrolling the space for threats. The weapons you wield seem at least partly connected to that corruption, harnessing it to use as ammunition. There is something very, very dead about the world that HR Giga has inspired in Scorn, and something very, very alive about the corruption that Basinski has inspired, and it's the contrast between these two that makes Scorn so interesting. You can, at times, explore unspoiled sections of this world, like a biomechanical mausoleum full of space and silence. At other times, the space is invaded by flesh, piled up and draped across gangways, and the silence is spoiled by the writhing of that flesh trying to break free from its great host. Presentation is Scorn's most powerful offering, but it's not like those Unreal Engine 5 tech demos, like, oh, look how pretty this is. It's not about graphics, though Scorn is no slouch there either. It's about the density of each space, how rewarding it is to look at, to notice its components, to question why certain parts may seem consumed by corruption while others remain unspoiled, and to wonder at all times who might have been able to build something like all of this in the first place. In my preview for the game, I noted a few concerns I had about the technical state of things, notably FOV, motion blur, and frame rate stability. I'm pleased to report that things are much better in the final product. Sadly, FOV remains static with no setting in the menu to widen it. That's a bummer because I know some people who suffer from motion sickness will struggle with this title. At the same time, I can understand the static FOV as this is a very linear game, a lot of the time spent in narrow corridors. Still, a few more degrees might have been helpful because the native FOV is very narrow indeed. Motion blur was my biggest complaint from the previews since there was no way to turn it off and the motion blur effect was extreme. The good news is that when the title launches, it will have a motion blur toggle. My version of the game didn't have that, but I was able to go into the game files and disable it manually. Turning it off was just like, oh man, such an upgrade. Turned the game from being borderline unplayable to actually enjoyable. The other complaint I had was in relation to overall frame rate and stability, and that is significantly improved here in the final build. I played on an RTX 2080 Ti, and I was able to run the game at 1440p max settings, and with the assistance of DLSS, I had a locked 60 with very little frame loss, no crashes, and no bugs at all to speak of, really. That was, of course, my experience only, and your mileage may vary on your rig. Incidentally, I did also try it on Steam Deck, but unfortunately, it was not functional. It would boot, it would load, and it would run really well, but I soon realized that the reason for that was that half the level had not loaded. It was literally just not there. And then I kind of walked forward and then fell off the edge of the level and tumbled into oblivion. Not sure if a Steam Deck update has hit in the last few days to make it playable, or if there are plans to do so in the future, but as of about 4 days ago, Scorn is definitely not playable on the Steam Deck. So if that's what Scorn looks like and how well it runs on PC, what do you actually do in this game? Well, not a lot, and I suspect that's going to be one of the greatest strengths to those who are down for that sort of thing, but also the biggest point of criticism for those who don't fall under its spell. Scorn is ultimately a collection of massive puzzle boxes. You'll arrive at a new area and will typically be greeted by a vista showcasing the full scale of the area you're about to explore. It's wholly static in this moment, dead, either through disuse or because it's been claimed by the sprawling corruption. Your job is to somehow bring it back to life. The process begins with exploration. Scorn does not give you a map, and some of its regions are large, multi-layered, and labyrinthine. Your first order of business is always to push as far as you can against the reaches of each space, seeing which roadblocks you need to solve for while sketching out in your own mind how it all fits together. A certain lock here, a terminal there, an obstructed passage, or a piece of machinery covered in corruption. You take note of all of these things before guessing at a sequence for solving them one by one. But the area design is tricksy. Because so much of Scorn's art design is so homogenized, and because you don't get a map to refer to, and because all the levels are so complex and windy, it's very, very easy to get lost in each of these spaces. Just in the review window alone, I had 2 other people message me being like, dude, I'm fucking lost, where the hell do I go? And I definitely encountered that feeling of desperate disorientation on more than one occasion myself. Perhaps it's bad level design? Maybe. Perhaps not enough work went into differentiating the look of individual segments, which would have made them stand out more easily in your mind. Perhaps certain pathways aren't telegraphed clearly enough. Perhaps the layout is needlessly windy and overlapping, where something more streamlined would have resulted in less frustration. All of that could be true, but there's another way to look at each of these points. Most level design does work hard to subtly guide the player through pathways, visual cues, maps, or UI elements, so it's refreshing to encounter a game that doesn't do that. It's an atypical approach to level design syntax, and without the hand-holding that most games provide. Is it confusing? Yes. Is it frustrating? Definitely, at least sometimes. But is it bad? I'm not so sure, and personally I came to appreciate the meta puzzle of exploration more than any other aspect of the game bar the phenomenal presentation. Nestled within that meta puzzle are actual puzzles, and these are quite varied actually. They range from finding things to Rubik's Cube style challenges that have you twisting dials back and forth until you've put things just so. None of them are particularly interesting on their own, but they each play an important role in the broader puzzle box that is each area. Powering on one terminal by completing a logic puzzle isn't that satisfying, but powering on 3 of those terminals opens up a new area of the map to explore. That's the high you're chasing right there. It's unlocking the next phase of the meta puzzle that keeps you pressing forward. And so while I think it would be easy to dismiss a lot of these puzzles as pretty basic and uninteresting, I don't think they're representative of the true exploratory and deductive experience that Scorn is at all times providing. The other puzzle that's going on is the combat puzzle, and I call it that because I think couching combat in this way helps to set the right expectations. Each of Scorn's areas only have a handful of enemies, tops. The ammo reserves you're provided are extremely limited. In the entire 6-hour playthrough, you really only need to kill maybe 3 or 4 enemies to progress, and the rest can be avoided entirely, either by waiting out their patrol paths or just by running past them. The way I've described it here makes it sound like a survival horror game, and I think that's somewhat accurate. But all of the survival horror games you're thinking of have way more enemies and more combat than this does. For example, this game has only 1 boss encounter and only 4 enemy types. That's it. So I think calling this a survival horror isn't quite right. I think it's better to say that Scorn has survival horror elements. So, are these elements good? Well, again, opinion on all of this will differ, but my personal view, the combat is easily the weakest part of the game. It ultimately comes down to enemy design. Enemy movesets and attacks engender some very gamey, kind of silly gameplay patterns from the player. The medium-sized spitter enemies are the best example. They take 5 hits to bring down with your penis poker thing, and so when you encounter them, you essentially just run around in a weird, awkward circle waiting for them to burn their attack, because you quickly learn that if you're moving fast enough at a perpendicular angle to them, they can't hit you. They also can't hit you if you kite them around an obstacle, so that's what you do, and it's kinda lame. The small, skittery, spitty dudes are really annoying because it takes 2 pokes to bring these guys down, and these motherfuckers do not miss, and they are always able to get off an attack before your poker thing recharges, so these guys are just a guaranteed sap on your health, and there's no counterplay against them when you're forced to confront them with your poker. So the counterpoint to all of this is that your weapons are actually very powerful and very effective, and so ammo management becomes a minigame where all the problems I've listed above disappear so long as you're smart about when to deploy that ammo. The problem is that ammo is really limited, and you never know what lies ahead, so you're always so loath to use it. Plus, if you fuck up and die, which you will, the checkpoint system is sometimes brutal. It'll send you back 5-10 minutes, and you need to repeat parts of certain puzzle sequences if you were halfway through them when you died. I really hated dying in this game, not because I failed a combat challenge or whatever, but rather because I just dreaded the thought of having to repeat a bunch of shit I'd just done all over again. A more generous checkpoint system would have made the overall combat experience more enjoyable because you wouldn't fear the frustration that it often culminates in. When it comes time to do a Game of the Year list for 2022, I know that Scorn will be one game that I give a lot of thought to. It's like, sure, let's slap Elden Ring on there, of course it goes on the list, but does Scorn? I don't know, but I do think there's a good chance. It reminds me a lot of Sable, which did make my Game of the Year list last year, and it's one that I come back to often actually. Like Scorn, it put a premium on unassisted exploration. Like Scorn, many of its landmarks were their own puzzle boxes to be twisted and turned until their secrets were revealed. Like Scorn, it was grounded first and foremost in an arresting art style that looked unlike anything else I'd played before. And like Scorn, it had a bunch of more basic gameplay elements that didn't hold up when you compared them to what other games offer. These gameplay elements really weren't the point. Sable and Scorn are both ambiguous, amorphous experiences that sit comfortably outside of the traditional buckets that we can so easily drop most games into. A little bit of this and a little bit of that, but always built around some central design principles that create an extremely sturdy foundation. But that ambiguity and that failure to commit to each of its auxiliary components also leaves it open to a lot of justified criticism. Those gameplay systems I mentioned earlier, any one of those might be the thing that gets your goat and you just can't set it aside in your mind. It'll be the thing that really makes you dislike Scorn despite the fact that you're desperately trying to love it. Which is fine by the way, but I really do think this one is worth trying. Maybe it isn't for you, but at least you've engaged with something that's very different to what most games are doing. There are precious few games that could be said of. Scorn is one of them, and so while it's not going to be for everyone, I do strongly recommend it. Alright, we're halfway through a 6-month partnership with Ridge here on the channel. Love these guys, love the product, and love hearing from all of you who have taken a punt on it and reporting that you're very happy with it. Always get a kick out of reading those comments, to be honest. Ridge are pretty happy with how things are going as well, so they called me up and they're like, hey listen, let's run a flash sale giving your audience 30% off my favorite Ridge wallet. Now, I actually have 2 Ridge wallets. I kind of switched between them just because Ridge sent me to and I like them both. One of them is North Shore, this blue one with some funky patterns on it. Don't ask me why I like it, but I do. The other one is for when I'm going stealth mode, night out on the town, dressed to impress. It's the matte black, sleek, stylish, sophisticated. In short, everything I'm not but wish I could be. For that reason, I chose the matte black for this special flash sale, and for the next 48 hours only, the matte black Ridge wallet is 30% off when you use offer code SKILLUP30 at checkout. And only for 48 hours, so if you've ever thought about maybe picking up a Ridge wallet, then now's the time because that is a pretty chunky discount. If you do miss out on that flash sale, or if you have another design in mind, then that's cool. Ridge has a huge range and all of it is 10% off with offer code SKILLUP all the time. Ridge wallets can hold all of your cards, well, within reason, and they have different options for the back, including both a money clip and an elastic money strap. I prefer the strap personally. They're just an extremely comfortable and durable means of keeping your cards and cash safe. Those bulky leather wallets, I can't imagine going back to one of those now. This just sits so much more comfortably on the body, you notice it less, and I think it just looks cooler. Ridge wallets are not only a great wallet upgrade for you, but they also make perfect gifts, since a lot of people don't know that there's a new, better wallet out there, and Christmas is coming soon. Oh my god, way sooner than I care to think about. So upgrade your own wallet or someone else's by visiting ridge.com/skillup and use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. SKILLUP30 will net you 30% off the matte black for the next 48 hours, and offer code SKILLUP will net you 10% off site-wide all the time. Thanks Ridge for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.